In this example, we're going to configure Factory Superstar to make this style of dining table. It's got a metal frame and it's a wooden top. We'll allow the length of the table and the wood type to be configured so you can offer multiple lengths and wood types to your customers. Before watching this video, be warned that this video is much longer than it should be and I made several mistakes when making it. Since it takes so long to make these videos and therefore even longer to rectify any mistakes, on the documentation page of our help website we've added a much shorter video just showing the end result and a list of what you need to add to Factory Superstar to get the same result. It might be worthwhile watching those instead, though we've kept this video online so you can see the exact steps involved and an explanation into why we do what we do. So first, as always, we need to get a pencil and paper and just make a quick sketch of what we're making. I've prepared this one in advance. I realise it looks like a lot, but it's very methodical. So first we start with the completed product here on the left. I've called it a completed dining table. We offer any length and multiple wood types, so we put these unknowns here below the name, and then we ask, if we don't have this completed dining table in stock, what is the next quickest way we can get it in stock? So the next quickest way would be if we had the correct size tabletop and the correct frame, and we assembled them and packaged them in the assembly and packaging stage in our workshop. So we add what we need in this stage and what unknowns there are. This is the stage here, assembly and packaging. So we need one tabletop and can choose a wood type, which is oak or pine, and we don't know the length. Then we need one frame, and since a longer table will need a longer frame, we need to know the frame length. Then we have 8 screws which secure the tabletop to the frame. Then we need bubble wrap to protect it. But how much bubble wrap do we need? A larger table will need more bubble wrap, so how do we account for that? Here you can start to see the power of the inventory management system in this equation here. So let's say that we want bubble wrap on the top of the table only and we want 2 layers of it. So we can say that the length of bubble wrap required is 2 times the length of the table plus an extra 50 centimeters so it hangs over the sides a bit. So we've put this equation in here, 2 times length plus 50. So now, regardless of what length of table is used, Factory Superstar will always account for the correct length of bubble wrap. And then we need a leaflet, and maybe it's got instructions on how to care for your table. So it's a seemingly insignificant item, but if you run out of leaflets, it's not the full product. Okay, so that's done. So we go through this list again of everything in the assembly and packaging stage. And if there's anything unknown, I'm going to add it at the top here. So we don't know the length. Here we've got length. We need to know a length. And we've got the wood type is oak or pine, so we need to know that too. And these will be our variables. And now we just repeat that process we just did, going through this list again. So we go, if this isn't in stock, what's the quickest way to get it in stock? So if the tabletop isn't in stock, we go to the wood finishing department here, and in that department maybe the wood is sanded smooth and sprayed with a protective lacquer. So we take an unfinished tabletop of the correct wood type and the correct length, and we get a certain amount of lacquer here and we spray the table. Again, the amount of lacquer will be dependent on the size of the tabletop, so we can take the length of the tabletop multiplied by the depth to get the surface area, and then multiply it by how much lacquer we use per area. Factory Superstar will then calculate how much lacquer we need and work out the stock availability and costs to produce a table of whatever length. Again, we write the unknowns at the top here. Note that we've added this depth variable here and here, rather than just using whatever the depth is for the tabletop. The reason for this is that we can use these tabletops for more products than just the one we're currently configuring, and allowing the depth to vary means that we only have to configure all these items here just this once and can use it for any number of products, including ones of different lengths, depths and wood types. That's a huge time saver. Okay, so we go through the list again. We go, what if we don't have the unfinished tabletop in stock? Well, we need to cut one to size in the wood cutting stage. Here we have 2 options. If the wood type is pine, then cut the tabletop from a pine panel. If it's oak here, if the wood type is oak, then we cut it from an oak panel. So then we need to ask if we don't have a cut pine panel in stock. What do we need to make it quickest? So ideally we'd just cut directly from the raw panel, but there's a quirk in the system that means you have to make an intermediate cutting process. This is explained in our sizing panels video, but for quickness, for the intermediate stage here, you just put the quantity equals the depth divided by whatever the actual depth of the raw panel is, and then click a link button in Factory Superstar so that this intermediate stage will be hidden. And this sounds confusing, but it's pretty straightforward when you see it. Just remember that you have to do it when you're sizing sheet goods. Okay, so that's the tabletop configured, and so this is all to do with the tabletop. So now for the frame. If we don't have the frame in stock, what do we need to make it quickest? In our welding and fabrication department here, we need 4 legs, which will be steel bar 50mm thick, cut to a length of 71 centimeters. Then 2 of what we call crossbars of a set length, and 2 long bars with length will be the length of the table minus 13 centimeters. If we didn't have the minus 13 centimeters, then the frame would stick out from underneath the tabletop. And you'll note that we call them legs, crossbars, and long bars. These are just nicknames, and when Factory Superstar generates the bill of materials, they make it much easier to understand what each component is for. You could use part numbers or references to an assembly drawing for names instead. So just for your understanding, these are the legs. These are 71 centimeters, and that's not going to vary. These are what we call the crossbars. They are again 71 centimeters, but you can see it's slightly thinner material. And this is what we call the long bar, and this is what is the length minus 13 centimeters. Again, we add the variable to the top here, length, and then we go through and ask, what if we don't have this in stock? In these cases, we just cut down the raw length of steel bar here, so that's the frame configured. The screws, the bubble wrap, and the leaflet here are purchased from a supplier rather than made like the tabletop and frame, so we don't need to add any processes to those. If they are out of stock, then Factory Superstar will alert you and tell you to purchase more. So now that we know what we're doing, we just need to add it to the system. When adding something this size into the system, it's often easier to add the purchased items first and then work from right to left rather than working from left to right as we did when making this drawing. So I'm going to start with the purchased items, so the pine panel, the oak panel, and the lacquer. So to add the purchased items, we go to inventory and then stock, add component. So this is pine panel raw, and I'll just go through these briefly. I don't want a description in this. The component is not for sale, so it won't show up when we go to add a sales order. It's a primary component. You can hover over any of these to get more details. For the categories is usually more important than location. That's how we order most of the things in Factory Superstar. So the category would be woodworking. You can add whatever categories you want by going to inventory, then categories. And I'm going to put it into wood, but for the rest of the examples, I'm just going to choose a random category for quickness. The reason that you would want to add an accurate location in addition to a category, when it comes to doing stock counts, you can order the items in the inventory by location, which makes it a lot easier when you're trying to find the items. So it'll be in the workshop and the wood section. The lead time is only appropriate when you don't add purchase orders. When you add a purchase order to the system, Factory Superstar automatically takes into account the actual lead time. So I'm just going to say roughly it's 7 days lead time. Each unit costs, let's say £50 or dollars, whatever, and this is important that each unit contains, so this is a panel good, it comes in 240 centimeters lengths. The units we're using is centimeters, but if you're in America, say, you would maybe want to change these units in company settings to inches. They come in 240 centimeters, and the minimum stock quantity, if I was to set this greater than 0, then Factory Superstar will highlight and alert me when the stock quantity drops below whatever I set it to. So I'm going to say minimum stock quantity 5. So whenever there's any less than 5 in stock, Factory Superstar will flag that. So that's the pine panel added. I'm going to add the oak panel raw, the same again. Each contains 240. And now I'm going to add the lacquer. Each unit costs 30. Each unit contains for the lacquer. The lacquer is a liquid and it comes in 5 litre cans. So 5 litres is 5,000 millilitres. And obviously if you've chosen different units, then ounces or whatever, it will come up here. So now I'm going to add the steel bar 50mm steel bar, 25 steel bar, screws, bubble wrap, and leaflet. 50mm steel bar raw. Each unit costs £15. Each unit contains, the steel bar comes in 750cm lengths. That seems to be a standard size for steel in this country. For the screws, I'm just going to add screws. Again, random things here. Each unit costs £6, and each unit contains is a box of 1,000 screws come in a box. So each box of screws contains 1,000 units. So screws is just units. Bubble wrap. Okay, for the bubble wrap, each unit contains, I think it comes in 75-meter rolls. The units are in centimeters, so 75 meters in centimeters is 7,500. Finally, the leaflet. For each unit contained for the leaflet, you could put down that you order a box of leaflets. Each box contains 50 units, 50 leaflets, but I'm going to put down each unit costs 5 pence and each unit contains just one leaflet. And the reason for that is just to offer a bit of flexibility, because sometimes we might order leaflets in bundles of 50, or sometimes we might order them in batches of 500. So putting them as a single unit, it makes things easier if we change our minds down the line in terms of batch quantities. Okay, so that's us gone and added all the items that we purchased from suppliers, and now it's time to add those items that we make in-house. So just for quickness sake with this video, I've just gone ahead and added all the processes, so assembly, packaging, wood finishing, wood cutting and welding fabrication. I've added them already, and you can add them too by going to production, processes and then add process. You can see them here. Okay, so to add the definitions, the items that we make in-house, you go to inventory, definitions, add definition, and I'm going to start with this one, the wood cutting one. Like I said, we start from right to left when we're adding the definitions. It's easier that way. So the cut pine panel has a variable length. So cut pine panel category. So we would recommend that you have a category for in progress works. This just allows things to be tidier, so you don't mix your in progress works with the end products. And it's the wood cutting process, and it's not for sale. We'll add the variable length in centimeters, and we'll add the subcomponent, which is the pine panel raw. And the length of the pine panel raw is just length, it's whatever length we choose. Okay, so that's us added this relationship. Now we'll add the size pine panel, add definition. I'm just going to choose random categories. It's again cutting. Length is blank because we want to choose a value. And depth is blank again because we want to choose a value. For this one we'll add a process time, and the process time can be, for example, length times depth. We can add in variable names here, but since it's always going to be about the same time to cut this panel, the units is in hours, but we can divide by 60 to convert hours into minutes, so just a 10 divided by 60, which is 10 minutes, or I could just as easily say like 0.1 hours. So we'll do 0.1 hours to cut this. We'll add a subcomponent. The subcomponent is the cut pine panel, and as per the quirk that I described earlier, the length is length, the quantity is the depth divided by the width of the panel. So that's the size pine panel done. Now I'm just going to go ahead and add the unfinished tabletop. Definitions, add definition. Unfinished tabletop, category. The variables are length and depth. And we also have the wood type, which is the variables are length and depth. And we also have the wood type, which provides options rather than entering in a value. Wood type is multi-select. Option 1 is pine, option 2 is oak. We separate these with a comma. And note that I've added an underscore here. You have to add an underscore instead of a space. Again, we'll add a process time for any sanding or preparing of the wood in this to make this unfinished tabletop. We'll add a subcomponent, which is the sized pine panel that we just added. When we add that subcomponent, we'll see we want this subcomponent to be used when the wood type is pine. The quantity is 1, the length is length, the depth is depth. So here this variable only applies when the wood type is pine. So I'm not going to add the oak one for this just now, just for quickness, but that's us added up till we've added the tabletop. Now I'm going to add this one, which is the finished tabletop. Finished. And we have a new process for this, which is wood finishing. The variables we have are length and depth again. Now, I'm not going to add the wood type here, and I'll show you why. You remember we added the wood type variable to the unfinished tabletops page. Watch what happens when I add the unfinished tabletop as a subcomponent. So I have one unfinished tabletop, length is length, depth is depth, and the wood type is choose when ordering. So I'll click submit, and you can see that it's automatically added the variable, the optional variable from the unfinished tabletop to this definition. So the only variables you need to add are variables with values. When any subcomponent has options, it'll automatically add those options when you add the subcomponent. I'm going to add a process time, and that's for the process time for finishing this, so maybe some more sanding and lacquering. So I'm going to take half an hour. I'm also going to say that we need some lacquer. Formula for lacquer was length times depth times 0.001. Okay, so that's the finished tabletop added. So we've done this whole bit. Now let's again continue from the right hand side and we'll do the frame. So we'll start here by adding the 50mm steel bar cut. It's in the metal fabrication and welding process. The only variable is length. We'll leave that blank. The process time to cut this is, let's just say it's 3 minutes, so 3 divided by 60 hours. The subcomponent is 50mm steel bar raw, and the length is length. And then we'll add the 25mm steel bar. So that's us added the cutting processes, and now we just need to add the welding and fabrication of the frame. Frame. Length is in centimeters. Process time, how long does it take to weld up this frame? Let's say it takes 1 hour. Subcomponents, the 50mm steel bar cut for the legs. The name, we'll say legs rather than 50mm steel bar. We'll say 4 quantity, and it's 71 centimeters each. Next, the 25mm steel bar cut, and that's for the crossbar. And there's 2 of these. Length is again 71 centimeters. And again, the 25mm steel bar cut. This is for the long bar. There's 2 of these, and the length is length minus 13 centimeters. So that's the frame configured. What you can do here is add a drawing so that the welders in the metalworking and fabrication department know the design of this frame. I'm not going to add a drawing here because I don't have one to hand. Now we need to add the completed dining table. This is the assembly and packaging stage, and this one is for sale, which means when you go to place an order, it will appear in the drop down list of things that are for sale. So the variables are length in centimeters, and that's blank, and again we leave the optional variable blank because that gets copied from the tabletop that we configured earlier on. The process time to assemble this, we'll just say it's another 1 hour. And let's add the subcomponents now. So it's a finished tabletop. Quantity is 1, length is length, depth is 80 centimeters. So it's always going to be the same, we're not letting depth vary. We only have the variable length defined in the tabletop, and the wood type will be chosen when ordering. Now the frame. Quantity 1, length is length. Now the screws. Quantity just 8. Bubble wrap is length times 2 plus 50, and that's in centimeters. And finally, a leaflet. Quantity 1. Okay, that's us almost done. I am going to add a drawing to this one, so add a drawing. I'm going to choose a file. I'm just going to choose the file that I showed you originally, just so that the guys can see when they're making it. Okay, so that's us done. So now I'm going to add it to a sales order to see what it looks like. Here's a sales order I made earlier. I'm going to add the item to the order. Quantity 1. It's the completed dining table. I'm going to click this made to order button so it adds a production order. I know it's out of stock because we've never made any before. So length 150 centimeters, and I'm just going to say it's pine because we haven't yet configured the oak. And here it is here. And everything's red. Everything's red because we don't have any of the inventory in stock. You remember we added all those purchase items, and we didn't update the inventory. So I'm going to go and do that now, and update the inventory for the pine panel raw and the lacquer, just so we can see what we're working with. So inventory. I'm going to update them by just updating the stock count just now, just to make it quick. Let's back to the sales order. We'll see that these are green, the pine panel raw is green, and the lacquer is green, so we have it in stock. So I've realised I've made a mistake here. It's shown that this intermediate step, the cut pine panel, is supposed to be invisible, but it's shown that this is an individual step. So I'm going to go in and change that. So click on the size pine panel, which uses the cut pine panel as a subcomponent. Then we'll go down to the cut pine panel, we click this link button, update link, and then let's go back to I'm just going to delete this and re-add it. So I'm going to add an item to the order, one dining table, made to order. And you can see here now that they've been linked, so it doesn't show the cut pine panel, it shows the size pine panel. And when in those screens in the workshop, they have each process at them. We'll click on that. This is what the guys in your workshop will see, and here we are. We have a okay, so I've realised I've made another mistake. It says the depth here is 150 centimeters. That should be 80 centimeters. So it's obviously used the length variable instead of the depth variable. So I'll go into the finished tabletop, go into the definition of the finished tabletop, and you can see here that I've got depth equals length centimeters. So I'm going to re-add that unfinished tabletop. So I'm going to go unfinished tabletop, quantity 1, length, depth is depth, not length, and wood type is choose when ordering. And then I'm going to delete, so you can see that one says depth equals length. The one we just added is depth equals depth, which is correct. I'm going to delete this, and then go back in and again delete that. So one dining table, made to order, length 150 centimeters, that's pine. And here we are here. The order has changed, lacquer and unfinished tabletop, because we changed that definition. But we have this linked process here. The intermediate stage is linked, and that's what's shown. So this is what the guys in the workshop will see. The size pine panel, they want it 150 centimeters long by 80 centimeters deep, and that uses up 0.67 of an entire pine panel. When they have completed making that size pine panel, they click this green button. Let me go back to that sales order and we can see the progress. You can see that that's updated. Now we are... So looking at this, I'm not sure, but I think maybe I've made it a redundant step. I think we could have merged the unfinished tabletop step, could just be merged with the size pine panel, and instead of having 3 operations in the wood cutting process, you'd only have 2, one being this intermediate stage. To change them, you would just go into... To change them, the quickest way would probably be to go into the size pine panel definition, add the multi-select variable for pine or oak, and delete this relationship, add it to the finished tabletop relationship instead. I'm not going to do this in this video because this video has taken far too long. It's definitely not the best example, but I will update that in the notes on the help documentation and on the very much shorter video that will appear there, so you can just copy the notes and it will be correct. Okay, I'm not going to make any more changes, but you'll see here that the drawing that we added, you can click there and view it, and that will also show on the process screen that shows in your workshop. And you can see that Factory Superstar has calculated the correct quantities for the bubble wrap, so 2 times the table length plus 50. And when you hover over these icons here, it tells you when the earliest it will be in stock if it is out of stock, and that's based on your previous purchase order history. And it tells you the cost. So here the cost to produce £20 in the raw pine panel. Then you add labour and you get £2 in labour, and that's based on the amount of time it took to take tabletop. So I do appreciate this hasn't been the best example. We're going to change the way we do examples, where it'll just be a very short video, and then you can just copy the details from documentation on the help page. If you have watched this far, thanks for watching, and if you ever get stuck, then just get in touch with us and we'll help you out.